Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 6 of Talk Politics. Now, just a little bit of a disclaimer. We are missing Anna and Aidan today because of our very busy schedules. We are unable to record at an adequate time this week. So I'm doing a little solo episode today. So, I hope you guys enjoy, but it will be a shorter episode. It won't have, the same sort of back and forth debate, and really just some sort of informatory chat from me, essentially. So I hope you guys enjoy. The first thing that happened during the last week, since last Wednesday, is that Starmer seems to be putting a thorn in the side of Burnham, certainly in terms of a leadership challenge. He recently just announced that he's spending 15 billion, or should be spending 15 billion extra money on defence, with sacrifices towards stuff like roads and things like that in the local council areas. So Starmer has committed to spending 15 billion extra pounds on defence. And for many, it's seen as some sort of shtick. At least Kemi Badenoch actually came out, and this seems to be some sort of move against Burnham and against his challenge. Because Burnham's in a really sticky situation if he enters into power, which he probably will, and I'll get to that at some point about his leadership challenge individually. But he's left in a really difficult position because he can cut funding from the defence, which of course is one of the most important aspects of life right now with the British public, certainly, because of course, you have the Strait of Hormuz, you have the Russian war against Ukraine is becoming progressively and scarily more and more important for NATO and NATO countries specifically. We have America being in such an unpredictable moment right now, having been such a centurion for Europe over the years. And now it seems like Trump has some sort of separation he wants from Europe. So we have the uncertainty around that, and the uncertainty around, France and Spain are managing to work together over their opinions over the Strait of Hormuz and Iran and things like that. So everything seems to be completely out of the water. So spending should, in theory, for most people in this country at least, be a top priority. People want to see defence, certainly in terms of the UK, be stronger. We rely too much on American missiles and American, anything like that. The British Navy is not what it used to be, and all of that jazz. So spending on the defence is needed. But another huge problem, and the second huge problem, probably, other than immigration for people in this country, is local councils, roads and things like that. Funding for local businesses and stuff. That's probably one of the biggest problems facing the Labour government right now, because roads is such a huge problem, and I think because it's so close to home, literally, because it's so close to home, it's a glaring problem. People don't really see defence blatantly in their face every day, but people are going to see a pothole blatantly in their face every day. So Burnham's facing a really difficult position here, because if he takes that funding that is proposed away from defence and he puts it back into the roads, then he's neglecting defence, or at least the media and the people can see that as him neglecting the defence. Whereas if he keeps it where it is, he's neglecting the councils. And I think Starmer's really put a thorn in his side. So that was the first bit of news, is that Starmer seems to be putting some sort of tactical move, I guess, some sort of long-lasting legacy. Starmer wants to go out on his own terms, I reckon, is probably what it's about. The next bit is Burnham specifically. He made an address in Manchester recently and over the past week, and he outlined intentions for a northern number 10 in Manchester. Essentially, it's like a second home for the Prime Minister, I guess. And I get what he's doing. He's trying to show that there's more emphasis and there's more support for the North, because Westminster has so much scrutiny over the years, sort of neglecting the North. And here from Burnham, there is a clear and outlined intention, being a Manchester mayor for a number of years. There is a clear intention of him to try and bridge this gap and this relationship that's built up between the North and Westminster. In other news, he wants to scrap stamp tax. Incredibly divisive policy. Very, very, very divisive. A current house policy that actually benefits taxation on houses based off of evaluations from the 90s, which I thought was quite interesting that they haven't been updated since. And his new proposed aspect would be taxing houses based off of land, the value of your land, which I thought was really interesting, because that would be a much more fairer, on paper, much more fairer taxation for everyone, because the South benefited much more from the original stamp tax, because, of course, coming out of a Thatcher and a very much Thatcher-right policy of reducing the white neck and and white-brimmed jobs, and sort of in the city and the focus on the city. Because as you know, as younger people, we see the UK very much as not a very blue-collar place. You know, there aren't factory workers anymore, really. There aren't miners, certainly, anymore. I mean, Thatcher sorted that. And yeah, that aspect that Thatcher had on the inner cities and certainly the south, because a lot of the north was where all of these blue-collar jobs were. And because the evaluations were done in the 90s immediately after her legacy, yeah, the south did benefit a lot more from these taxations. House prices rising because of so. So it's very much a northern-friendly, again, policy from Andy Burnham. He seems to be very much a man of the north, as you would expect. But I think it's very, 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 very important to point out the difference that he wishes to be making in terms of the fairness and the way that things are run between the south and the north. Just a few other things, really. More problems over the Strait of Hormuz. Of course, we had the agreement between the two countries that we were discussing last episode. Again, that seemed to have gone completely out the window. The Strait of Hormuz is again closed as of right now at about 8:17 in the evening on Wednesday, the 1st of July. The Strait of Hormuz is closed. Bombing is happening left, right, and centre between the two countries. And it was basically united again by the US and having some of their cargo ships, or was it a helicopter, that was shot by the Iranians, and therefore bombing ensued. Another thing which I think is really important that people seem to be, as anything goes in terms of international policy and international relations, it moves so very quickly. And as a result, the media moves on quickly. The media does need interactions, and old news doesn't get interactions. And an unfortunate side effect of this is that we forget about very, very important humanitarian aspects, excluding the Epstein files, which obviously is something we should be constantly discussing. But something that a lot of people have probably overlooked, but I think is incredibly important, is that Israel have bombed some parts of humanitarian areas around Palestine and around where Hamas is based. And I think this is immensely important. Another very large piece of news regarding Palestine and regarding Israel is that they were found by the UN, in the UN's opinion, in the legal UN's opinion, that they were committing war crimes, that they was unjust. And essentially the recommendation from the UN was that they should withdraw and look for a diplomatic effort to fight against Hamas. Of course, Israel, thinking that they have, whether you think they do or they don't, thinking they have a legitimate right to be doing what they are doing, they've carried on. And they are now bombing, or whether it's accidental or not, I think it's very important either way, they are now bombing humanitarian areas around Palestine. And some people have died. Refugees, war refugees. That is, again, a war crime, let alone the alleged cases of them killing children and etc., which they very much have. I think it's safe to say now that if the UN has said so, the highest point of international law, they are killing children. They are committing war crimes now. I think an argument for Zionism and for Israel, I think that's a little bit watered down now. It's a little bit saturated. I mean, Israel have a right to be able to be angry about Hamas. They have a right to be able to want to destroy Hamas. They have a right to be able to defend themselves, but they do not have a right to kill children, and certainly not to kill children in humanitarian areas, where the whole point is that it's safe from war. In other news, congratulations to England for getting through from the round of 32, everyone. So I hope you all watched that game. And if you're not English, then I hope that your country went through. Unfortunately, Scotland did not make it through the group stages, so I'm a little bit torn about that. But hopefully, England can make it all the way to the final. Yeah, that's about it for today's episode. Of course, it's a solo episode, so we wouldn't have been expecting much anyway. Hopefully, we will have our last and final group episode next week, potentially having all three of your hosts on, including producer Aidan, our backup host. Hopefully, we'll have all three of us on next week. I feel like it'll be fitting. And then once we finish off for the summer holidays, you'll maybe get me, maybe not. Maybe you'll get some posts, some shorts on Instagram Reels, maybe on TikTok if I can work out how to create an extra account on TikTok. But yeah, so thank you very much. Please follow the Instagram, Talk Politics for You on Instagram. It's from the youth to the youth. Yeah, so please follow the Instagram. Please like and subscribe this video, please, because it really, really helps. Our views are growing currently from at least 2 weeks ago. They were pretty substantial for the first 3 episodes, but we'd really like to get back to where we were before. Thank you very much, everyone, and I hope you've enjoyed. I tried to do it's really difficult to do a solo episode, so I really hope that you guys have enjoyed. So please like and subscribe.